Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic briefing with myself, Andy Bargh and Sean Martin. Still an international week, so Celtic news, much like it was yesterday, is still trundling along fairly slowly. So we're going to kick off this morning by recognising that two Celtic players are actually playing against each other very shortly over on the other side of the world. It's Australia against Japan, which means Tom Rogic and Kyogo Furuhashi will be on the pitch on opposition sides. This morning for us, this evening for them. So I think we know that Tom Rogic is starting the game for Australia, Sean.
Yep.
We're just waiting on the Japan team news to drop. But how do you feel about Celtic players being away on international duty? Because I think quite often, given what happened with Kyogo Furuhashi only a month or so ago, there can be a wee bit of apprehension, especially when the big players are playing week in, week out, maybe similar with Callum McGregor at Scotland.
Well, you've hit a nail on the head there. I think Ange Postecoglou said it before he left, saying if you get injured, don't come back. I think the last international break was an absolute shocker for Celtic. This one doesn't seem to be as bad, and this is probably the last hurdle to get over from a Celtic perspective. Rogic, all right, he kind of played the super sub role against Aberdeen, so he was only on for 20 minutes that game. Which is in contrast to the last international break where he was playing consistently for Celtic, and then he went away. I think it was Qatar and Vietnam, was it? He went away and played. It was China they were playing, but in Qatar. I think anyway. They were playing away two times and then away back over. I think he played 90 minutes and 86 minutes or something in the last international break. This time it's not as bad. He went away having, as I said, played 20 minutes against Aberdeen. And then I think in the last game, it was about an hour he got against Oman. So in that respect, he's not necessarily been flogged the way that it was in the last international break. So from Rogic's perspective, even another hour today, and as long as he's not injured, you would think it's still a positive. In terms of Kyogo, we need to see the lineup first. I think a lot of Celtic fans will be hoping he's on the bench rather than starting. But we'll just need to see the lineup for that.
Well, what we're going to do just while we're waiting and chatting about this is open up the topic of conversation to anyone that's tuned in. So get in the comments involved, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're watching, just drop a comment. We'll be able to see it and let us know what you'd like to hear being spoken about this morning. So we'll wait for those to come in, but in the meantime, we will actually just go on and have a wee look and see if Kyogo Furuhashi is starting for Japan. But I'm trying to think of the other international players that are away at the moment. I suppose Callum McGregor will play for Scotland this evening. He's not long back from an injury for Celtic. Him and Furuhashi are that good that they're both involved for their international teams pretty regularly now. So I think it just comes with the territory of having good players, Sean. It's a risk that you need to accept if you're a Celtic fan that's not too bothered about international football.
I think with Callum McGregor, I don't know. I mean, it's the Faroe Islands. Will he potentially maybe be rested? Again, that'll be maybe one that Celtic fans are hoping when they see the lineup that he's on the bench. But I don't know, with McGregor in particular, albeit he had that injury there. But I think in general, Celtic fans are so used to just seeing McGregor week in, week out, whether it's for Celtic or Scotland. Apart from that wee injury spell there, he's just an ever-present. So I don't know if there'd have been, rightly or wrongly, I don't know if there'd have been as many worried about McGregor as the likes of Kyogo. But I mean, again, we'll need to see later on with the Scotland team. But the fact that it's Faroe Islands gives me a wee bit of hope that maybe he won't start, and if he does start, he won't play maybe more than an hour or so.
I think maybe Grant Hanley coming back to the Scotland team might mean that McTominay's shifted up to midfield potentially. So that might mean that Callum McGregor's the one that's rested ahead of Gilmour. I'm just seeing the team now, Sean, for the Japan-Australia game. Furuhashi's he's on the bench. Furuhashi's on the bench.
Well,
yeah.
Possibly a result then. We'll see. But I've jinxed it now. He'll come on and get injured. It's a sub. But
there's always such a Scottish link with the Australian team. Martin Boyle of Hibs, Jackson Irvine, formerly a Celtic youth and of Kilmarnock and Hibs as well. Harry Souttar, literally born and bred in Scotland, but opting to play for Australia in the starting lineup as well. Aaron Moy, former St Mirren. I mean, you're not short of connections there with Scottish football.
No, it's and you've got Ryan McGowan. I presume he'll be on the bench as well.
Yeah, I've just noticed him on the bench there. That's right.
Yeah, quite a few. And just in the starting lineup alone, you've got at least two that have been linked with Celtic in the summer. Part of the transfer reports. But...
Well, we had a chat yesterday actually about the teams, not to go over old ground, but just quickly interested to get your opinion on it because he is looking so good at the moment, about Martin Boyle. He'd signed his new deal at Hibs just recently, and I think we identified him yesterday as one of the ones in the Premiership that might be able to make an instant impact at Celtic if they did opt to make a move for him. But has that ship sailed, given that he's now nearing his late 20s, do you reckon, despite the form that he has been in for the last, since lockdown?
It probably does. And I think as much as he is a very talented player, I think you're probably looking at him being an impact or squad player at Celtic more than a regular. That's not to say that he couldn't make an impact right enough, but I think it would be that. I think you're right. I think the age probably counts against him. I mean, Celtic this season, of all seasons in the last maybe decade or so, has been the one where Celtic have been willing to sign slightly older players, slightly more so-called first-team ready players, and maybe in their mid-20s rather than teenagers or early 20s. But I still think it was probably, I think the age counts against them there.
Yeah, I think despite the form, we probably expected Bill to go down south, to be honest, because he had that release clause in his contract as well that was just, for some reason, never triggered. But looking at some of the players that Celtic have signed recently of that age, I suppose you could put Johnny Hayes in that bracket maybe, when he was doing really well at Aberdeen. He was brought for a couple of seasons, wasn't he? So, it's not... It's unusual, but it's not unheard of, I suppose.
No, and I think Johnny Hayes, when he left, actually, there was a feeling that maybe they should have held on to him. Not that he was going to be starting every week, but he was certainly a serviceable player, and he could fill in several different positions to a high enough degree to cover when needed. And he obviously loved playing for the club as well. So I think there was a feeling when he did leave that maybe in terms of versatility and squad depth, maybe they should have held on to him.
I made a wee note yesterday. We actually didn't get onto it because we ended up speaking for about 20 odd minutes. But I made a note of some of the players that Celtic have signed from other Premiership clubs over the past wee while. There are a few older names there. Hayes was one. Barry Robson, he wasn't a youngster when Celtic signed him under Gordon Strachan. Neither was Paul Hartley. Presley, I mean, he was well into his veteran years when Celtic picked him up. Don't think Mark Wilson back in the day was a youngster when Celtic signed him. He was maybe mid-20s or so. But yeah, if you look overall, Armstrong, Mackay-Steven, Christie, these guys are all kind of more on the younger side. I think Stokes is more of a younger boy as well when Celtic picked him up from was it Hibs Celtic signed Stokes from, I think.
I think, see some of the players you mentioned there, that was like the Strachan era. And I think there's a definite, after Gordon Strachan left and then Tony Mowbray and all that, I think there was a definite shift in the kind of profile of player that Celtic signed. So I think the likes of when you're going up to Stokes and stuff, that was like the Neil Lennon, that kind of team where it was Hooper and Stokes and Joe Ledley and stuff. And I think there was more of an emphasis on the kind of either teenagers or very early 20s and getting them maybe on a free or paying maybe a couple of million in terms of maybe Gary Hooper, like that kind of player from the lower leagues in England. I think there was a definite change. Although I do agree that historically there have been key contributors that have come in at a wee bit older.
Yeah, it's funny how some of them work out and some don't. Some of the names that haven't worked out for Celtic from other clubs, Scott Allen came in with a lot of expectation, didn't really play much. Derek Riordan, probably a similar sort of vibe there. Jack Hendry, I think we've spoken about Jack Hendry enough this summer to wonder what the heck happened there with his promise, and then shifting out onto various clubs and eventually settling in Belgium. Lewis Morgan, maybe another, that looked like he might have been good enough to play for Celtic, and then was moved on to Inter Miami, where he's been absolutely outstanding by all accounts over there. I don't watch too much MLS football live anyway, but from the highlights, Lewis Morgan looks like he's totally tearing up over there.
I think with the Jack Hendry one, I think it was Adam Miller wrote the column for us about it. It was a wee bit of an overreaction and revisionism going on with Jack Hendry. I mean, he obviously, Brendan Rodgers that signed him, obviously saw something in him, so the raw qualities. But the amount of times that Celtic fans actually saw those qualities on the pitch was probably minimal. And I think it's just a typical kind of story of, because he's improved since he left, the question rears its head of, oh, well, should Celtic have kept him? But I think both things can be true, that he wasn't good enough for Celtic at the time, and he's vastly improved since he left.
Yeah.
I think all power to him as well, because he genuinely seems to have improved. He's found that situation for himself in Belgium, where the league suits him, the football suits him. He got a move to a slightly bigger club in Belgium. He's broke back into the Scotland team, assisted the winner the other night. So, I mean, fair play to him, but I don't think it's one of the ones that Celtic fans should be necessarily concentrating on, because when he was at Celtic, he didn't really show the kind of form that he's shown now. So
sometimes a change of scenery, an environment, manager, all these sort of things contribute to how well a player is doing. Just because Jack Hendry was at a huge club in Celtic doesn't automatically mean that he's going to perform well. You know, there's loads of pressures that come with that, and I think maybe being out of the limelight for a wee bit maybe possibly helped him, because he was still pretty much a young boy when he was at Celtic, wasn't he? Early 20s at a push.
I mean, again, I've come back to the fact that both of them can be true. You can have the raw qualities and just not show them at Celtic, whether that was maybe given more time or whatever. But I don't think that necessarily was the case. But it can also be true that once he's left, he's became a much better player that now looks as if he might suit Celtic. But he had to leave to get that much better. So it's almost a catch-22 there. And there's very little kind of point in revising it to the extent that, oh, well, actually Celtic should have kept him, I think, is the way to think about it.
Well, pretty quiet show this morning, Sean. I think that'll do us, really. It's that international week, as we touched on at the start, so there's not really too much going on for us to go over and over and over again. So, look, thanks for anyone that tuned in, and we'll be back again tomorrow once the Scotland game is out the way, and start looking forward to the Celtic game at the weekend. All right, so thanks for joining, everyone, and cheers, Sean.
Cheers, Andy.